Hello and welcome to the Swine Disease Reporting System. This is the report 32, and my name is Daniel Linhares with Iowa State.
Hello, my name is Giovanni Trevisan with Iowa State.
And we have a special guest here today. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Mark Schwartz, which is a friend. He owns and works as director of production systems in the Schwartz Farms. And Mark also serves on the advisory board for the Swine Disease Reporting System. And just a fun fact, he's also working on top of all that. He's also working in his master's degree with the University of Minnesota group. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon, Daniel. Good afternoon, Giovanni.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today, Mark. We are going to go over the report and ask you questions as we go. So before talking about PRRS virus, which is the first item here in the agenda, would like to start, Mark, by asking you as a producer, how much and why do you spend money on diagnostic testing? And what are the decisions you make based on those diagnostic results?
That's a great question to start with, Daniel, because it's such a key integral part of our system is using diagnostic capability to understand an emerging problem or a disease on a farm or in a flow of pigs, as well as to surveillance of replacement gilts, for example, in quarantine. In isolation, for routine monitoring to understand our for example, PRRS status on each of the 15 sow farms, and so there's a wide variety of reasons we use diagnostics, but narrows down into major categories are for understanding the status of replacement animals prior to opening up a quarantine. And to understand the status of the wean pig flow, if there's a change from positive to negative, PRRS, for example, and as well as when we are nearing completion or at the end phases of elimination programs, whether that's for PRRS or several Microplasmas programs in place right now, as we work to understand our status, if we've been successful in elimination, to do aggressive, robust testing with various means, either for PRRS or for Mycoplasma for those closures. Then, of course, for the ongoing diagnostics in the nursery phase, the grow-finish phase, whether it's a PRRS, flu, enteric diseases, etc. So, integral part of our production system is using the diagnostic capabilities of the diagnostic laboratories.
And how much would a production system spend on diagnostic per sow or per pig or per year?
That's a good question. I don't know that number. It's large as an absolute number. On a per pig basis, it's relatively small. And obviously with the capabilities of pooling samples, for example, spreads our diagnostic dollar. We try to use them wisely and not send in diagnostic samples for when we know a flow, for example, has a certain pathogen or status, not to over-test. And so that's a challenge because testing has become easier. I do have some numbers here I can show. This is something I prepared a couple of years ago, Daniel, for the ASV meeting. And I looked at the number of submissions Schwartz Farms submitted for diagnostic testing at the laboratories. And it's increased in the last number of years. And one reason is that it's easier. Processing fluids and oral fluids primarily have made the process much easier to to do compared to collecting blood samples and tissue samples, etc. So to attempt to put this into relative terms, I said, well, yes, we submitted more samples to the diagnostic laboratory over time, but our company grew over time. And so I looked at the submissions relative to the change in our number of sows or pigs finished, as we do buy some wean pigs also outside of the system. So yes, in relative terms also, we have submitted more samples to the diagnostic laboratory. Again, that coincides with the change in status to getting sow farms negative and not using continuous exposure, for example, to PRRS virus and replacement gilts. So you have negative herds and you have negative gilts coming in. We test more aggressively than we did years ago. And oral fluids also, it's easier on the nursery and grow finish phase of production to submit samples to understand your status. So those, that has changed. We have increased our number of submissions to the laboratory over the past number of years in relative terms.
All right, thanks, Mark, and thanks for sharing that. So let's get in the first section of the report, which is PCR, agent detection here by PCR. And Giovanni, the first one in the list is the PRRS page, right? PRRS RNA detection by PCR. What are the highlights for this month in the report?
Well, this month we are entering the period of the year where the detection of PRRS virus started to go up. And it is repeating in 2020 when compared with last year's. And from August to September, the PRRS virus detection went up 2%. And that's basically contributed by detection in wean-to-market animals that had a substantial increase by 6% from last month to this one. When we look for this detection at a state level, we saw increased detection above 3 standard deviation in Nebraska, Missouri, and Indiana, and specifically for wean-to-market animals that was above in the Corn Belt region from Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. The advisory group did point out that this increase in detection in wean-to-market animals is most contributed by the changes in the weather of this period of the year, lateral breaks between wean-to-market farms, and introduction of negative pigs inside of positive regions. Meanwhile, the advisory group says that more research is needed to understand the lateral transmission between PRRS virus and document the cost-benefit of interventions like biosecurity on the farms. Until we don't have those tools completely done, and coordinating where to place negative pigs and using immunological intervention, like for example as a vaccine, could be helpful to reduce this impact of PRRS virus in the animals.
All right, and so going back to Mark, this is another year. It has been 30 years or so of PRRS virus, and it's always there, but the outbreaks come and go in a seasonal kind of fashion. As we start, we have the first signals here that the season this year is about to start, right? As demonstrated by the numbers in grow finish. I'd like to turn back to you and ask, in your opinion and in your experience, what are the key factors that have helped you guys to manage PRRS virus throughout the years?
Yes, that's Daniel. The PRRS virus obviously is the pathogen that we struggle with in the industry and have for many years, and we're doing as an industry doing a better job measuring the change in incidence and prevalence. The MChimp project is going on, I believe, 11 years now, and now the Swine Disease Reporting Service to quantify two different systems, right? One is driven from just submissions and one is a voluntary basis, but both robust systems. And so we're able to understand at least a starting point in our industry of trying to quantify the amount of virus that we're dealing with. And like I think Chesterton said, we're all in the same boat and we're all seasick, right? I think for a lot of years, we as an industry always pretended that we were different than the other producers, and we didn't struggle with these problems. And at some point, we're finally getting this information out and understanding as an industry where we're at. So how we can use this information, again, is understanding when you get understanding on a regional basis and control measures, right? So we use vaccine as a control measure on certain flows going into certain areas regionally. If we have farms, when we have farms making naive negative pigs, unvaccinated going into very clean areas, especially clean areas in which we have agreements with other producers on sites that are relatively close to one of their production sites, we call them protected sites, since we work with that information. So understanding that, the status, the true status, and using this information both through swine disease reporting and through MSHMP have helped us understand the seasonality and the control measures for PRRS in particular.
It's a key word there, at least my mind, is we're talking about regional control, right? It's not just this site or that site. We still want to make the best decision as possible to each site, but you got to bring it to the whole system, or at least a kind of regional perspective, right? So that you can try to decrease that pressure of infection and do your best as in a populations of populations and not just one or individual farms, right?
Yep.
All right, so flipping the page here to the next page of the report, we're now talking about PCR detection of coronaviruses. And so, Giovanni, in this page, the report covers the 3 coronavirus, PED, Delta, TGE. What are the take-homes for this page?
Similar to what is happening with PRRS virus, detection of PED started to increase this month, and that is basically 2% more from last month, from August to September, and that's happening in adult sow farms and winter-market animals. The last 2 weeks of September, detection of deltacoronavirus is increasing in adult sow farm. Overall, in the month, the detection of deltacoronavirus was similar to last month, but there is a change that is being captured by the data. TGE virus, we did not have detection for September of 2020, as we did not have detection for TGE in September of 2019 and 2018. The advisory group did point out that there was some breaks with enteric coronavirus in winter Finnish farms that was associated with trailer contamination, and that was from the east to the mid-east of the United States region, covering all the place. A few things that the advisory council reminds us that are very important to control Delta coronavirus introduction in the farms. First is try to avoid visitors from outside of the site and implementing very simple biosecurity measures as having clear demarcation of clean and dirt areas, and require visitors and workers to change clothes to assess the site.
It's simple, but it's still in the industry. Don't want to speak to extrapolate this for all industry, but still it's common. We see at least some finishing sites that still don't have some of those basic biosecurity measures in place, right? There are a lot of finishers that they do have the showers, but people don't necessarily take the shower in, shower out, which is very different from sow farms. I think it's pretty common. I mean, I would say rare to find a sow farm where you don't at least change clothes to get in, right? So how do you see all that, Mark? I mean, both for PRRS virus and for PED, as Giovanni highlighted here, there's the detection rate, the positivity rate, it's kind of starting to spike, right, in terms of those pathogens detection, specifically in growth finishing pigs. What can people do in addition to that they already do year-round right? We don't want to send a message that biosecurity is seasonal. You only need biosecurity now. Biosecurity is year-round. But what can you do in addition to what you already do as a producer to keep these viruses out of that population?
Another great question. And it is interesting because it's the perhaps producers can cut corners seasonally and get by, right? I mean, temperature and daylight length and all those factors reduce the probability of a PD surviving on a truck or trailer. And when it's a very hot summer, July, we had maybe a record hot July. And so you can cut corners and cheat, and you're not going to see this increase. And I noticed on your report, the syndromic report on PD, it's interesting. It appears to be much less prevalent in 20 compared to 19, but the signal is given that, again, that may be changing. So, in a system, again, that you're attempting to prevent PD at any level, but it's evident in the real finish phase. Most every break we have in the finishing barn site is associated with a marketing event, a truck coming back to a site. And so again, we've learned seasonally how to take precautions to use this diagnostic results when there is a finishing site that's PD positive, redirecting the supervisory staff, redirecting the feed deliveries when possible, making sure we're not sending maintenance people to that site and then to other sites. And so again, it's having information, having data based on diagnostics, confirming yes, it's PED or no, it's not, and making decisions, management decisions, day-to-day decisions based off that information. What else could the industry do? I am a strong believer that our Achilles heel is our market transportation system. Unwashed trailers coming back to finishing sites multiple times per day, multiple times prior to a wash. And when we see how PED spread rapidly in June of 2013, that exposed our weak link very, very rapidly. We've improved as an industry, but that is my concern, is the next pathogen, novel one of any sort, that will be our weak link in preventing that spread throughout regionally and throughout the United States.
And as you talk about regionally, that risk is at the end of the finishing, right, when you're talking about marketing pigs and having the trucks back and forth. Some producers may struggle to find the economic kind of justification to wash that truck since the pigs are just going away. But as you've been reminding us since the beginning of the conversation, is got to think about that region aspect. And so if you have pathogens coming back and forth, the risk to bring those back to the sow farm or to other finishing or grow finishing phase that are kind of earlier in the phase, right? That the risk is there, right, Mark?
Right. Yeah. And one change in many systems, I believe, the years ago would be more sow farm nursery finisher. Now it's more wean to finish. With the nursery finisher model, at least you had a barrier there, a buffer from the sow farm to the nursery and nursery to finish. So your market pig transport trailers were going to the finishing barn, and you weren't coming back to a wean finished barn in which the sow farm trailer was crossing paths. So we've removed that buffer in a big share of the industry, putting that sow farm back at risk, and then creating more virus and then to, again, move more positive pigs throughout a region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Wow. What else? So next in the report here, Giovanni, it's Mycoplasma hyopneumoniae, DNA detection by PCR, and numbers are also on the rise, but as expected by the forecast models, right, for this time of the year. What are the highlights, Giovanni, for Mycoplasma hyopneumoniae?
As you said, there was a substantial increase from September to August, and this comes at the time of the year that it is expected. Field observations mention that is within what they are seeing in the field and expecting for this time of the year. And this detection of PCR from 4 VDLs, when we do a bridge to the I-state VDL disease diagnosis, we are seeing an increase in diagnosis of Mycoplasma at this time of the year. So both are kind of associated and is, as I mentioned, expected for this time of the year.
Mm-hmm. And so bringing back to you, Mark, talking about Mycoplasma monitoring, you've been showing recently here at the Lehman conference some novel ways to monitor that in suckling pigs, right? Want to talk about that?
Yeah, so in that presentation, it was the ability to collect oral fluids off of the nursing piglet because of the nature of how that pig is being raised and the wean age. It's just the pig is more aggressively going after these ropes to allow us to get oral fluid samples. In that situation, that's a Mycoplasma negative flow, and most our system is, and plan to be 100% negative 12 months from now. So for us, the Mycoplasma detection is, again, in exposing those replacement animals intentionally and having confirmation of that during this closure phase, this Mycoplasma elimination phase. And again, so it's critical that we have a system in place that we can that we were able to know the status post-exposure and then understand the status at the end of that closure. So this is one that I've worked on very hard for the last 10 years, is Mycoplasma elimination from our entire system. It's interesting to me on the Swine Disease Reporting Service data, it looks like the number of submissions for Mycoplasma hyopneumoniae is decreasing relative to the previous years, and then the relative positive rate would be somewhat steady. But that for me begs the question: do the cases drive the testing, or the testing drive the cases? Especially with Mycoplasma, and in our system, it would tend to be a year-round phenomena on the positive flows. On the negative ones, we don't test those. So that's one that I'm hoping that 12 months from now I won't have to pay a lot of attention to, and then keep the system negative. And
it's an obvious question, but the motivation to go negative is better win to finish performance, right?
Correct. It's in moderately challenged flows with other pathogen, PRRS and or flu. It's expensive in the wrong set of mix of pathogens. It's a disaster. So yeah, the answer, in my opinion, our opinion, is to be negative.
Mm-hmm. All right. So moving on here to the final page of the report, it's about disease diagnosis. So beyond just pathogen detection, that's disease diagnosis as confirmed by a diagnostician. And Giovanni, what are the highlights for this month?
At this month, we had a increase in diagnosis, a little bit of everything, basically. We had Mycoplasma pneumonia, we had coccidiosis, we had Streptococcus suis, we had Bordetella septica, and we have Clostridiosis. So it's a period of the year that the weather starts to change, the diseases start to be more frequent, affecting the animals, and we had this small increase of diagnosis of identified by the algorithm that we monitor this data.
So, Mark, how do you guys at Schwartz Farms use this information about disease diagnosis for macro epidemiological standpoint and to kind of make decisions in the system based on that data.
Yeah, I think it becomes evident quickly. Work to get PRRS negative. Don't live with it. We've done that in the past, and at times you're limited of how many sites you can close at once and manage the elimination programs. But again, PRRS is that driver of many times, and you can have a PRRS negative and some flu, and you're going to have acceptable production. You can have PRRS negative, you have some strep. When you combine those pathogens, is again, control the ones you can control to get negative. I don't know if there's such a thing as a flu negative breeding herd. If there is, we're not able to do that. But PRRS we can, and it takes a lot of work and patience. But it just to me illustrates clearly the importance of managing the pathogens we can, eliminating the ones we can, and the ones we can't are less severe, less detrimental. Again, using the report, it's interesting to me the increase in coccidiosis that was picked up by the reporting service, and I would, in our system, I had the same situation. We had coccidiosis on a couple of breeding herds that we have not dealt with historically. And it's interesting how that, as an industry, that those trends move in tandem. And that per se, do we make a management decision from? No. In this situation, we do what we can to sanitation and hygiene and controlling coccidiosis. But it's very interesting to me to see that change. Again, there's a shortage of a product that's effective in using for coccidia control. Again, did that shortage of product create the increase, or did the increase create the shortage of product of the product? And so I look at that and attempt to understand what should we work on, right? If we are effective in our elimination of Mycoplasma, what can and can't be controlled and eliminated if possible.
Yeah, I like your story to keep drive the system to a healthier system, and it pays off, right? So with that, Mark, that's about we had here for today. Always like your perspective, always science driven. As our friend Bob Morrison would say, you're the most scientific producer. So it's because it's always kind of based on data driven. And so, what are the final messages here that you have for today, Mark? We'll be interested.
I think to me, on a broader view, is just the importance of the creation of these projects, such as the Swine Disease Reporting Service, of the MSHIMP project. Those projects in which, as an industry, from a voluntary basis of a bunch of producers that comprise a good share of the number of sows in the U.S. who voluntarily report changes in PRRS status and PED, et cetera, and then the ancillary offshoots of that, and the Swine Disease Reporting Service, having this data from multiple VDLs to understand the trends and the emerging diseases in our industry. To me, it's critically important going forward. Time goes fast, and you think in the recent years, the number of new pathogens we've dealt with, right? We've gone from circovirus and PED and in just a number of years. And so having that, unfortunately, for the next emerging disease is important. Mm-hmm. That as an industry, we're not floundering around trying to react to it. And so I think it's healthy as an industry, what we've been working on to help producers individually and for the good of the industry across our industry in the country.
Well, thank you Thank you very much. Thanks again for taking the time to be with us, Mark. It has been a pleasure to have you as our special guest this month in the SDRS program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm honored to have been asked and to share my thoughts, and thank you for your hard work with this project.
We're having fun with it. Can tell you that.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thanks, Giovanni.
Let me whisper